All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're taking that daunting concept of the impossible and we're going to transform it into actionable possibility. We'll be blending some timeless wisdom from a true Hollywood icon with modern psychology and topping it off with some absolutely ruthless time management strategies. So if you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything on your plate, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get into it.
Starting off with Section 1, the power of perspective and reframing the impossible. I want you to think about your own life for a second. What do you actually do when you're faced with a challenge that just seems insurmountable? When you're wrestling with burnout or maybe imposter syndrome or just those relentless everyday pressures of a demanding career? Your own internal limitations can make the path forward feel entirely blocked off. It is so easy to look at a massive goal and just throw your hands up and declare it impossible, right? Well, Audrey Hepburn had this brilliant take. She famously said, "Nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible." And I just love that. It perfectly illustrates how a simple linguistic twist can cognitively reframe a massive barrier into a personal challenge that you can actually tackle. By breaking the word down into "I'm possible," this quote is essentially telling us that our biggest obstacles, they usually exist entirely in our own minds. It's asking us to spot the opportunity right in the exact place where fear usually lives. That brings us to Section 2, Audrey's legacy of resilience, quiet strength, and action. Now, what's really incredible about this quote is that it isn't just some empty, feel-good optimism. Hepburn actually lived it. We all remember her for her ethereal beauty and elegance for sure, but her actual life was an absolute masterclass in resilience. Born in 1929, she spent her childhood in the Nazi-occupied Netherlands during World War II. She survived severe food shortages, the deep trauma of war, and she even actively supported the Dutch resistance. And then later, when she broke into Hollywood, she totally sidestepped that typical 1950s bombshell stereotype. Instead, she leaned into clean silhouettes, short hair, ballet flats. She essentially forged her own path of quiet strength, genuine human vulnerability, and self-worth. She was constantly defying external limitations and what society expected of her. And as we look at her later life, she definitely didn't slow down. By the late 1980s, Hepburn retired from acting to devote herself almost entirely to humanitarian work. She became a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, and she went on these incredibly grueling field missions: Ethiopia, Sudan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, all to aid impoverished and starving children. To put that into perspective, these missions required an immense amount of grit to make the impossible possible for vulnerable populations all over the globe. She didn't just talk about possibility, she literally operationalized it. Okay, moving to Section 3, the psychology of self-efficacy, the science of belief. The really crucial point here is that this kind of fierce, lived optimism, it's actually backed up by robust psychological science. What Hepburn demonstrated so naturally is exactly what psychologists call self-efficacy. It was introduced by Albert Bandura back in 1997, and it basically refers to your belief in your own ability to successfully plan and execute specific tasks to get the result you want. By redefining our own narratives, by truly internalizing that "I'm possible" mindset, we're actively building up our self-efficacy. And that level of self-efficacy directly dictates exactly how much effort and persistence you're going to put in when things get tough. Having high self-efficacy isn't just about giving yourself a pep talk. It is a measurable predictor of success. It translates directly into better academic and professional performance, way more inner motivation, enhanced resilience when you hit a roadblock, and vastly improved stress management. It actually aligns really closely with psychologist Carol Dweck's whole concept of a growth mindset, the fundamental belief that your abilities can be developed through dedication. People with high self-efficacy, they don't just throw in the towel when things get hard, they step back and look for a new strategy. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, working smarter, not harder, beating the planning fallacy. Because, believing you can do the impossible is a great first step, but actually executing it requires the right tools. You have to work smarter. Have you ever wondered why you almost always end up scrambling 5 minutes before a deadline? Well, you can blame the planning fallacy for that. Identified by Kahneman and Tversky in '79, it's this optimism bias where we consistently, almost comically, underestimate how long a future task is going to take. That crazy adrenaline rush of finishing something right under the wire? Yeah, that is the fallacy in action, and if you operate like that all the time, it is a fast track to chronic stress and burnout. So, to beat this planning fallacy and actually execute on our biggest goals, we have to learn to ruthlessly distinguish our tasks. We've got to separate the urgent from the important. Urgent tasks? Those are the pressing issues literally screaming for your immediate attention: a ringing phone, an impending deadline, your computer crashing.
Important tasks, on the other hand, are the strategic things that actually advance your long-term goals. They don't usually scream for attention, which is exactly why we so often push them to the back burner.
Enter your new best defense system, the Eisenhower Decision Matrix. This is just a fantastic, tangible framework to prioritize your work based on those exact parameters of urgency and importance. Think of it like this. If a task is both urgent and important, you do it first, no questions asked. If it's important but not urgent, you plan it and schedule it for later. If it's urgent but less important, try to delegate or delay it. And if it's neither, honestly, you just resist it entirely. Delete it. This matrix is literally a game changer for cutting out the noise.
All right, let's wrap things up with Section 5, Mastering Your Time and its practical application. Let's dive into exactly how you can put that matrix into practice today to take back your schedule. Time management isn't about somehow magically manufacturing a 25th hour in the day. It's about taking control of the 24 you have. Here's a proven 4-step process. First, track your time to see where it's actually going. Second, analyze those findings so you can cut the fat. Third, prioritize your tasks using that Eisenhower matrix we just covered. And fourth, schedule those tasks realistically. Give yourself a buffer so you aren't falling victim to that optimism bias. It's all about actively managing your day instead of just reacting to it. I highly recommend this. When you actually track your time for a week, the results will probably shock you. It really forces you to evaluate if you are truly working efficiently or if you're letting sneaky little distractions like scrolling on social media or answering low-priority emails totally steal your focus. You have to get into the habit of asking yourself, is this a good use of my time right now, and does it align with my ultimate goals?
Because managing time is ultimately about controlling the flow. It's kind of like an hourglass. The sand is going to drop no matter what you do, right? Your job is just to make sure it's dropping into the correct buckets. By setting really healthy boundaries and taking an honest look at your own capacity, you start aligning your everyday actions with your biggest ambitions. And to really perfect this, start throwing in some smart scheduling habits. Try color coding your calendar so you can see your whole week at a glance. Give your days themes, like maybe Tuesdays are strictly for strategic planning, so you avoid the mental exhaustion of constantly switching contexts. And this is a big one. Schedule tasks based on your natural energy flow. If you are a morning person, do the hard cognitive stuff before lunch. Don't fight your own biology, work with it. Build routines, and please, never feel guilty about scheduling in regular, restorative breaks. You need them.
So what does this all mean for us? Armed with Audrey Hepburn's fierce optimism, the hard science of self-efficacy, and a concrete system to master your time, you have every single tool you need to reframe those barriers. The impossible is really just a problem that you haven't broken down into small enough pieces yet. So I'll leave you with this. What impossible task will you make possible today? Just pick one thing and get started. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.